Welcome to the Operator Signal. Today I am joined by Dan Thompson. He is president of Jamak. Dan, thank you for joining us today. Tell us about yourself. Tell us a little bit about the company.
Hey, James, thank you so much for letting me join you today. I lead a 51-year-old family-owned manufacturing company that's located in Weatherford. We operate in a material science domain where we focus on silicone, and most people are aware of plastic seals and different materials that come from hydrocarbons. Our entire business is based around silicone, which comes from sand. And in our business, we formulate compounds, we make the materials here, and we mold or extrude them into seals and gaskets. Much of our business is range from medical devices to heavy machinery, construction, different aspects where our parts always go in somebody else's part, where they want to really have reliability and durability, but it must go through some temperature extreme or something else. That silicone is the only answer to be able to do it from a science perspective.
Yep, it's fascinating stuff. There's a lot of applications, and so let's get right into it. I know you've got a wealth of insight for us. So, what are you seeing in the operating environment right now in your market? Are you seeing growth or tightening?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. As we went through the end of the Biden administration, we saw most transactions almost pause. Nobody knew what to do. Whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter if the environment's just not stable. Mm-hmm. As the Trump administration came in, it's been a much faster paced in terms of looking at the business, the tariffs that were put around the world, how you operationalize that in your own business is quite key. And so as long as everybody's in the same boat, we're fighting through the same economy, but we saw business opening back up and people starting to make major decisions where they thought there was enough investment to move and make deals happen. In our case, there's other companies in the United States, a few of them left, who build with silicone like we do. And they're great companies and they serve customers well, but our real competition is in China, places like Shenzhen or Thailand or Vietnam. And so being able to understand the global economy, how those are the people that we're competing with, sets up a kind of an interesting operating dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm, for sure. So where are you finding pressure in the business? Is that with supply chain? Is it labor, capital? Where are some of the pressures you're finding?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think when we started the beginning of 25, there was a major effort for reindustrialization and reshoring. And I think that many customers who manufacture and may consume silicone or other parts, they initially thought that it was going to be a real movement to reshore, and which is exciting for us because we would love nothing than to serve larger audiences. But we've seen that that's not really the case. I mean, it's certainly the headline, but policy is not really driving people to consider domestic manufacturing as much. Now, I know that there's hundreds of billions of dollars of capital going into data centers and other things, and those are really happening. But in terms of our world where we build parts, it's really because we're winning it because we can protect the intellectual property and we can solve some scientific standard. So in many ways, it's as tight of an environment as it's been in years in terms of our development. And these giant capital infrastructure projects like power lines and infrastructure like that have been on hold for a couple of years. They appear that they're going to move forward, but the ground hasn't been broken in all the places we'd like to see for things to really happen.
Okay. And I know at the time of this episode, you and I recently connected at one of my events, and you kind of shared on this around like the labor challenges that you face in your industry. Can you share a little?
There's kind of two or three perspectives. You know, one in terms of our like competing against somebody in China. In our business, we have to build what we call a tool. That's a mold, for example, which is what the product gets made in. And in the U.S., it may cost me $45,000 to make that. And that means that a machine shop somewhere is just, they're super wizards in terms of cutting steels or aluminums to make it so that our product injects and flows properly. China, that same tool is about $10,000. And the reason that this different experience exists is the Chinese adopted a manufacturing policy that's kind of the way we build highways. You know, they think of it as a public good. And so when you're in China, yes, there's a labor rate differentiator, but the cost of capital to get tools and things in China is about 1.5%. Here in the US, it would be about 7.5%. And it's not that bankers are villains. It's that we live in a capital structure where they're looking for businesses with a certain cash flow and balance sheet. And this tool is something that there's just really not liquidity to finance these things, which is difficult for us as a manufacturer, because that means that we really have to self-finance all the things that we do. Because once you have a tool in place, that unlocks a future revenue stream with the customer that you're building for. There's a lot of tension in the system, and the Chinese, they use manufacturing as a public good, kind of like we do a highway or a runway. And here we're just in a different system, which puts a real pressure on us. I think that if there's a breakthrough that's occurring right now, it probably comes from artificial intelligence and AI. And when I talk about that, it's really the augmentation of these people that you have in your business. We have a workforce that's kind of split into two cohorts. Some of them have been with us 30 or 40 years, and then most employees you probably keep for about 3 years. And so being able to transition skills and upskill the talented people that you already have with you, help equipping them with tools to accomplish more, faster, deeper. Because remember, all your buyers at these major companies that buy our parts, they're equipped with AI also. And so just being able to respond in the type of paperwork, your ISO standards and all your quality control systems that we have, it's a lengthy process to engage. Some people don't like to do their taxes, and because it's an arduous process, and that's part of our buying process or our selling process. So we're really, while there's pressure in areas like labor and capital for our business, we're seeing that there's other areas that are really breaking through and letting us run better businesses and being able to move faster than we've ever moved.
And that swings right to my next question is, where are you still finding growth opportunities? Is that in new markets, or is that in, talent, or somewhere else?
You can read the headlines in the country. JP Morgan, for example, put aside, I think, 1.2 trillion for their strategic investment fund. Mm-hmm. And so that gets allocated, and it's starting to flow through the system. But you look and you read about like rare earth minerals and what's happening in the United States. Well, we have all those minerals that have been tied up in EPA regulations, and that's why we don't do the mining. We're the ones who created that industry, and it's all been moved offshore. But we have a customer, for example, that builds machinery for mining, and that's going to go 2 or 5x what they were doing with us. And so you take the headlines, and then we have to look through as to who's building the picks and the shovels that empower that headline. That's where our customer growth is. And when we get a fair shake and can compete domestically because they're manufacturing here, it's great for our business.
Yep, absolutely. Do you have maybe an example of some of the picks and shovels, so to speak?
Well, you could think of it as like the machinery that goes into mining, right? They're giant machines. There's only 1 or 2 companies in the world that build those kind of things. You could think about it. We're working and looking at the high voltage power lines and transmission, to feed these data centers and the construction and growth like it's been happening in Texas. You'll hear people talk about, the need to put utilities in neighborhoods. Yeah. Well, that's one side of it, but also just moving the high voltage lines across our state. Well, that sets up a giant opportunity for people, and we may be building components that go into that process. The single largest deal that I'm looking at, I've been looking at it for 3.5 years. Everything's qualified. The chemistry's proven. We're just waiting for the, often municipal, regional, state, federal regulators to say, yes, go do it. And then that company will move into it, and then we can begin production in our industry here in Texas.
Yeah. There's lots and lots of growth opportunities, it sounds like, especially here in DFW. So let's go a little broader. As president of Jamak, what forces are shaping your decisions over the next 1 to 2 years?
Yeah, I think that the key move that we initiated about 5 years ago, our business was probably 60% automotive. And that had been trailing down for 15, 20 years and was really a function of NAFTA and how the auto companies moved production to Mexico. And so They're very challenging companies to work with from a selling perspective. They have very intense buying protocols that go with it, where they want you to take prices down every year. It doesn't match reality. It's just the model that they want. That subsequently wrecked a lot of manufacturers like ourselves. We survived that period. But 7 years ago, when I came to Jamak, Amanda McAuliffe also joined me, and we said, let's get the hell out of that business. Let's go pick businesses that are better. And so today, 7 years alone, 70% of the parts that flow through our factory didn't exist 6 years ago. And that's what's allowed us to really distribute further to medical devices and construction and automotive, and not so much automotive, but like heavy end machinery and appliances as examples. So those are the areas that we're seeing growth in, and it's just a slow process in terms of winning those deals. And we see a lot of that manufacturing starting to happen in Ohio and Michigan, which is good for the country that those people are going back to work. It's an interesting fact as you think about the future of a city. We've had some great wins in Fort Worth, where we've really won the beachhead with some massive deals. And it really, 2 zip codes are getting the majority of that benefit, but it comes across the whole area. And as we're an area where so many people are moving to Fort Worth, I think that they were celebrating we're now the 10th largest city. It's an interesting perspective in that the people that arrive and have there's a broad range of human capabilities that arrive beneath those numbers. Some people have an IQ of 120, some people have an IQ of 80, and those people need different kinds of jobs. And manufacturing like ours, we hire across that entire distribution. We need people who are, intellectually very sharp and capable, and we augment them with AI. And then we also have jobs for people with that family that are great at the repetitive task and consistency and building the parts that we need. So it's a very exciting time. And as we're able to onboard more of these platforms, we get to hire more people, which also helps the economy in that when you're a manufacturer, we import money into the economy instead of being a net exporter of money out of the economy. So It's really a win-win for the communities that we're in.
Yeah, for sure. All right, last question, and we'll kind of look as a kind of a prediction, if you will. What do you see coming next for operators like yourself here in DFW?
Well, I can't speak for all operators. I just know my business very well. And I think that one of the things that's most exciting is probably the aeronautics industry. We have had for 60 or 70 years, you go back to World War II, and the industries that have been built here. And I think that there's a lot of growth occurring in those, but that's kind of our local ecosystem. And certainly in our company, we had some of the first materials in space with the original Space Lab project in the 80s or 70s. And I think that we'll be finding ourselves plugging better into our local ecosystem of manufacturers that are doing things. And, the gap that we don't have a lot of tooling manufacturers here, but as many machine shops, cross that threshold and scale up, it'll provide us a better ecosystem to work locally.
Yep, absolutely. Dan, I appreciate you spending some time with us and sharing your insights, your experiences. I love hearing from operators like yourself.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. You got a depth of knowledge and breadth of knowledge, and I love that. But again, thanks for spending some time with us. For those of you watching, I hope you find this as interesting and insightful as I do. To find more episodes of the Operator Signal, you can find them here on YouTube, or you can connect on LinkedIn. Dan Thompson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.